Hey guys, so in today's video, I wanted to go over the 5 different bodies that I talked about in the previous video, more in detail about how they can mix with each other, what a balanced version of that body can look like, and what an imbalanced version of that can look like. So I will actually be using myself as an example solely because, when it comes to some of the other bodies like emotional and mental, like imbalance, I'm very comfortable being upfront with the uh, how that looked like for me. And so I figured that would be a good starting point. Perhaps some of you guys can relate to. So let me do my screen share thing. Okay, and then we're going to start out with the physical, actually. So this basically is a representation here of the 5 bodies. I got this page from my crystal healing book, and I was like, ooh, I like that visual. So it does include the chakras here, but we're not talking about the chakras here. That is, I'm familiar with it, but I'm not like specialized in that. Okay. So we're going to talk about like the physical, it says the physical aura, but I could call it the physical body. Then there's the emotional body, the mental body, and the spiritual body. Now, I'm not sure how easy the colors are for you guys to see here, but I have the words color coded to the, the energy body here that we're talking about. So I don't know how easy it is to see the orangish red here, but that's why I have physical body here for physical aura. So y'all don't have to try and read the fine print here. You know what I'm saying? So just know as I go through these different bodies, like emotional, it's going to be yellow versus like mental, it's going to be green, going back and forth with that. That's how I'm using it. So that way you guys can look at like the different colors and possibly be able to tell. If this is still too small though, let me know. That's what the slide's for. Anyway, so with the physical body, there are several different pathways that the energy can flow to that, usually keeps things balanced. So you got the electrical pathways. That is the electrical part of your heart, for example, the electrical part of the brain. Whenever you see a scene on TV and someone has no pulse and they're about to go and be like, Claire, and they do a shock, it's to restart that electrical part of the heart in that case. So that's one way energy flows in the physical body. The other is through water. Now, this water can come in many different forms. There's blood, there's lymph, like your lymphatic system, there's your sinuses, there's so many different, fluids that flow through your body every day to keep us functioning. So that is one of the other main ways. And then I put meridian here because after a while, when you call everything energy, sometimes it starts to sound a little confusing. But in this stance, I'm talking about your meridian points. So any of y'all who has thought about or seen a holistic chiropractor, anyone who's gone to have acupuncture, acupressure, things like that, those are focused on the meridian bodies. So if you're familiar with Qi, from Eastern and Chinese culture, like that's what they're referring to. Those are like the energy pathways that are like directly linked to the physical body of it all. And how sometimes they'll put pressure to try and open up some of those points to get energy flowing to help balance the body out, right? So how do you go to the next page? There we go. Okay, so the physical body, this is an example of what the physical body can look like when that flow is disrupted. And so for those of you who are not familiar with this is me getting an infusion for rheumatoid arthritis. I had rheumatoid arthritis since about 2018. And as time went on, because I didn't realize what was going on, so I didn't do anything really to balance the physical, it just got worse and worse and worse. So it went from just a little bit of swelling in the hands to fingers locking in place and me having to go on infusions, like in an infusion center, to be able to function because the swelling and the pain and the fatigue was that bad. So that is a very clear example right there for me. But interestingly enough, and this is why all five bodies is so important, my mental, even though you can't see the mask and the stuff because of the pandemic, you know, this was last year, my mental was actually in a really good place. So I was actually working on one of my video ideas actually while I was sitting there getting my little, you know, infusion for however many, I think it was like an every 8-week infusion on top of the other meds that I was taking at the time. And not that the medications do not help and not that they don't balance it, but I do want to emphasize I wasn't doing a whole lot on my own intuitively to balance my physical body. I literally was just focused on the mental at that point. And so that's why, even though like mentally I was doing great, physically I still needed these meds. And now fast forward about a year later, I'm off most of my meds actually. Yeah, I don't take any meds these days. And it's been over a month. And I'm not the only one who's managed to achieve this, so I know it wasn't a fluke. So let's go on to what it can look like when it's balanced. So these are several different stages. I included my little kid photos because many kids, they're born with their bodies balanced. They kind of already know what to do. You know, children are born into the world and they regulate themselves and balance themselves naturally. And then society teaches all that stuff out of us, and then we end up sickly. At least that's what happened with me and what I've noticed with a lot of patients when I worked as a nurse. So that's why I wanted to include those, because as a little kid, my body was perfectly balanced. I was totally in line. I was totally in tune and aligned, you know, and it shows. You know, the energy of a child can look very different from the energy of an adult. And that is one of the reasons why that could be the case. So with this picture, I had rheumatoid arthritis. This actually was my wedding night, actually, when I got married to my what was husband at the time. And you can see the arthritis gloves here. So it wasn't fully balanced, but I was actively doing things myself to try and balance things out. And I was mentally in a good place. So even though I was very overweight and in pain and could not wear the wedding ring on my finger because it swelled up so bad, we almost had to go to the ER to get it cut. Yeah. You see the energy of my face and my posture and how I physically looked is way different than if I responded to all that in a totally different manner. So this is what I would consider like in the process of restoring balance here, basically. And apparently it is time for my cats to eat. And then this last one, that is actually me off of most of my medications this year. And me actually being able to hike when before I wasn't even really safe to drive 10 minutes to the store because I got that lethargic behind the wheel. So I wouldn't even dare walk anywhere. And then later on, by this time, I actually ended up developing a heart issue on top of that. So if I tried to get up and walk around or stand for too long, my heart rate would go through the roof. And then I'd be short of breath and dizzy and sweaty. You know, it was a mess. But I had balanced myself physically to a point where I actually was able to walk to a garden and then go and hike throughout the little trail, which if you have chronic pain issues, that is huge. If you have chronic fatigue, that is huge. If you feel like you just don't have time, that is huge to be able to be like, dude, I can do that. So I share all of this to show you guys what is possible, not to gloat. That's not the purpose here. I want to show you guys what's possible, how you can go from where you are right now to where you want to go. Like, it is possible. I am not the only one who's managed to pull off feats like this, and it's not an anomaly. So moving forward to the emotional and mental, I put them together in this sense just because they're very closely related. But in the I guess in the like the course that I put together that I'll go over like in a totally separate video, if that ends up being something that you might find helpful, I'll break it down a little bit more. But essentially, the emotional and the mental body are also, you know, yellow and green, and they also have many different pathways depending on which one you're talking about. So the mental body is going to have thoughts. Thoughts are just things you think. You'll have feelings in response to the thoughts, but the thoughts are not feelings, which is why these are technically separate, but for like, you know, concise purposes, I just put them together. So your mental body, a lot of energy flows through thoughts. I am this, I have that. My life is this, my life is that. Your emotional body mainly will process through feelings. So I feel this, I feel that. Not I feel like. That's actually a thought. I learned this in a special therapy last year when the pandemic put me in a really low spot. If you say I feel like, that's not a feeling. Feeling is more I feel. I feel sad, I feel mad, I feel there's some sort of emotion, versus I feel like this isn't going to end. That's a thought. Disguised as a feeling, but that's a thought. Yeah. So mainly emotional will go through feelings, all feelings. And the thing with thoughts and feelings is if you either A, stuff them and you don't let them out. How many of us have stuffed down tears because it wasn't acceptable to do so, or you didn't want to appear weak, or stuff feelings of anger because you wanted to keep the peace or you didn't want to make a scene? Okay, when you go and push those things down, guess where it stays? The body. And as you go and keep those in your body over time, especially those of you who have gone through something traumatic, like your girl here, you have years. I do mean years, some of y'all decades of emotional and mental and traumatic pain stored in your body. And your body's just like, okay, we have a problem. I don't know what this problem is, but we have a problem. And what's one of the best ways to get our attention when the body's saying we have a problem and we're not listening? Pain and fatigue. So the other way for energy to flow with these is the electric. And so if any of you guys are familiar with neural pathways, that can go from like the hormones like serotonin, you know, if you're familiar with that, you know, or like melatonin, ones that influence how you feel. Or also there's like an electrical network in your brain too. So there's that, separate from the psychological, although that's mixed in there too. But your brain has an electrical network. And one of the ways that an imbalance can pop up, if someone has a seizure, that's an electrical issue in the brain. Any y'all out there with fibromyalgia? That's an issue with the automatic part of your brain. It's not a psychological issue. Awareness is a work in progress as far as the rest of the world and the medical community goes, but it's actually fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and the other type conditions like I had POTS. That's a neurological issue. The automatic part that you can't control with the brain, like the organ with the brain issue, and an energy issue, which is why you try all these different things that they have for treatment right now for fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and POTS, and they don't do a whole lot because it's an energy issue with the automatic part of your brain. For me, when I started to balance that out and learn like the root cause to get that stuff balanced, I don't take any meds for fibromyalgia anymore. I don't take my blood pressure med that I had to take for a high heart rate. I don't need that anymore. And I don't have symptoms versus before I was on all these different types of therapies, meds, treatments, none of that stuff was working. Because it was kind of like putting a Band-Aid on the problem, not getting to the deep root cause. And with some of these things, it's starting to slowly come into the medical community, but it ain't where we want it to be just yet. So you kind of, there are things that you can do to help expedite that process and work with your doctors and nurse practitioners and your providers, because it's a good teaching opportunity. You'd be surprised how many providers don't know what fibromyalgia is, for example. You'd be surprised. So everyone's learning, no judgment, everyone's learning. So for me, this is, I think, a very good example of an imbalanced mental and emotional body. This was actually a picture of me in high school. I was almost about to graduate. I want to say this was 11th grade. One of the worst years of my life, but not because of school, because of certain things that I had experienced outside of school. And so I don't hide it. I survived childhood trauma. I was fortunate enough that I wasn't born into it, but it still popped up, and I held a lot of stuff in, because any of y'all who've been through that or been through a dysfunctional or toxic family, what's one of the most important things in that household that is taught? Keeping secrets. Stuff happens, we don't talk about it. Well, if you're not talking about it and you're not letting yourself feel it, or you have family that's not letting you feel whatever feelings you're feeling, guess where all that's getting stored? That stuff doesn't go away just because you know, it's been 10 years, 5 years. That stuff's still there. So last year, I still had stuff to process from my adolescence because I've been holding on to it that long. Think about that. Eventually, the body gets overwhelmed and it's just like, okay, we have a problem. So how are we going to let you know that there's a problem? Pain in all these places, we don't know where it came from. All these weird symptoms, we don't know where it came from. All this anxiety, we don't know where it all came from. And all these different body parts that don't seem related. And then we get a diagnosis, or we're trying to get a diagnosis if it's cryptic enough. Y'all know. Y'all know. And you don't have to go through something extremely traumatic for stuff to get stored. You lose a family member or a precious pet, if you don't fully grieve that stuff, it gets stored. And it's not, I don't want this to be like one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, why did I store all this stuff? You probably weren't ready to process all that stuff at the time. The body tries to protect you. And so if you are not ready to go and carry that anvil, it's going to focus and just give you what you can handle and then store the rest until you're ready to handle it later. So, I mean, I don't want this to be seen as a negative thing. It's just, all I'm saying is that, you know, all of that pain, that emotional pain, mental pain, that trauma pain, even if it was something that wasn't, you know, maybe this a different type of extreme, like you felt pressured, you felt like you couldn't be yourself. All of that is what I would call soul suffocation. That kind of does a number on your mind and on your emotions, and you store all of that stuff. And after a while, it's like, okay, we're ready to come out. It's stale in here. It smells like moldy cheese. So, the reason why I share this photo is because I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the term trauma face. This was my trauma face. There's barely a smile there. My eyes are flat. There's barely any life in it. Faking a smile and not putting any forth effort into expressing myself the way I wanted to. Because at that time I was silenced. You can tell there's a very different energy between this photo of my younger self and me now. Not saying she had this exact face, that's what it is, but I can tell you because of me, that's my trauma face. That's what it looks like. It's very subtle, but that's what it looks like when these bodies are off balance. And again, I know some of these photos are the same, but again, when children come into the world, they're balanced. All of the negative things that children do as they grow up or they take on, they learned from someone else. Who learned it from someone else? Who learned it from somebody else? And at some point, we got to give ourselves permission to not follow that cycle anymore. I got to a point where I had a really major nervous breakdown in college because I tried to act like I was fine. And I still looked like that flat face from the previous photo. And I couldn't hold it in anymore. And when I say I had a catharsis, I had a catharsis. Like I bawled my eyes out. I physically felt so like I wasn't used to that feeling. But that was the first step for me because at the time I was ready. I'm like, okay, we need to do something different. Now, those of you guys who are already in counseling and seeing a therapist, you're already balancing your bodies right then and there. And the reason why I say this is even if you don't feel like it's working, it's working. It may not be the fastest way, and I'm starting to learn there are actually faster ways to deal with trauma. Trauma is the thing that's really like your big block. But the reason why it works is because, you're storing all of these negative emotions, these hurts, these pains that you've experienced from the past, right? At the same time, you're still going through life. So, think of it like this huge loan that is like collecting interest from you, right? And so then another charge pops up because, I had this bad day at work. Or, this person said or did this thing, and it's just made me so upset. And see, even if you're at a point where you're just talking about that sort of stuff and you're just venting, by you venting, you're keeping that from being stored in here. You got enough stuff stored in here. And so to me, that's paying those bills off, right? So that's keeping the compound interest from growing because you're starting to deal with that. And then as you deal with all these other deeper things that have hurt you for a long time, you're paying back more of that stuff. So then the interest bill gets smaller and it gets smaller. And then as those negative energies come out and those pains come out, you allow space to heal from that. You know how healing it is just to be able to say, you know what happened, what that person did was really jacked up. Do you know how healing it is just to go and acknowledge that? You know how many people don't do that? I was one of those people. And when you go and bring that stuff out and you let that stuff flow and process out of your system, it leaves space for positive stuff to flow in and stick even better than it did before. And this picture is the result of all of that. This picture, I had literally just separated from my ex-husband. Didn't know where I was going to live. I just got up and we got to a point where we both were triggering each other. The energy dynamic between us that we both contributed to wasn't working, and it was becoming toxic for both of us. I just up and left. This is how I brightened up a couple days later. And it's not because that person's XYZ. It's the energy. It changed the entire environment of my energy. And so I was able to feel safe in my own space to process stuff that was bothering me, that, you know, he may or may not have been in a place to really receive that stuff from me, and vice versa. And then he also had a shift. Was it a painless shift? Absolutely not. You know, I thought that, you know, this person was my permanent soulmate, and I had to go and process, acknowledge, and accept that that was a temporary soulmate. That is not an easy thing to swallow. But my energy shifted because the environment that I was at was different. So any of y'all who've been on my YouTube channel, y'all saw some of my videos on the phone. That was why I was in a hotel. And it was a very, I wouldn't change that experience for the world, because I basically, I didn't realize it, but I gave myself the space to be able to heal and let go some of that gunk, you know? It was a big thing that jump started my entire healing process for chronic pain, for those of y'all who are chronic painers. Okay, and then this one, again, I talked about it already, but even though I had my little rheumatoid arthritis gloves, I could not wear my wedding ring on my finger because my fingers were swollen, and I was super overweight and did not like how I looked. You know, I hid it very well, and I still enjoyed myself, and I had a different headspace. So my energy here, you see the energy in all of these photos are totally different from that last one where it was a flat face and you see a difference in the smile. That's kind of how I'm able to look at people and be able to tell, oh, they've been through some stuff. It's written all over their face. So that was longer than I thought for that one. Let's move on to the next set of bodies. So we got the spiritual and the energy. Now this one was a little bit harder for me to figure out how to explain it, because I'm a visualization person, so I can visualize it. But the difference I would say is, like, spiritual is focused on the energy and your connection to that which is bigger than just the self. So your higher power, you know, spirit guides, you know, angels, you know, whatever you are connected to that is outside of just your current, like, I'm here in the 3D self. So whether you call it religion, whether you don't, it's the same type of energy, but, you know, a vehicle to express it, a vehicle for you to let that energy come out. So whether you are into the chakra healings, Reiki healing, you know, energy type healing stuff, meditation, yoga, prayer, positive affirmations and intentions, you know, that's all falling under the spiritual. Energy is kind of, in a sense, all of the other ones combined. So anytime you are balancing the spiritual body or the emotional or the mental or the physical, you're actually balancing the energy body as a whole. You're just working on different facets of it, I guess would be the word I would use. Like, you're just working in different areas. Like, you know, the tire is just one part of the car. But if the tire is out of whack, you're not driving that car very easy, are you? Kind of like that. So sometimes, like when I first stepped into this, I saw energy body as separate from spiritual. They can be one and the same, but when I think energy body, I personally go and think chakras. That's just like how I understand and process the energy body. For other people, it could be something totally different. Every time you go and pray, that's balancing your energy body. whether you consider it spiritual or not, you know, chakra balancing, meditating, yoga, even if you're doing the yoga for a physical purpose, like for exercise, you're still, it doesn't change the fact that you're balancing energies with it. So you're still balancing your bodies that way. So this one is why I kind of like put these two together, because like everyone's kind of different. Some people would consider spiritual and energy body the same, some separate. For me, I had to separate the two when I first started, because like part of my trauma involved spiritual conflict, because I was in a victim headspace. You know, I was like, why is all of this happening to me? How can I be loved if I'm going through all of this pain? You know, so I was not ready to even address this. But if we were like looking at energy, oh yeah, I can look at that just fine. But I wasn't ready to look at the spiritual aspect of it, regardless of the, you know, method that you do. So these are some of the different pathways energy can really flow for these two bodies. And again, it's really up to you how you want to categorize this. You could combine these two, you can have them separate. It really kind of doesn't matter, because I mean, you're still getting the same results anyway. So I started drawing. That was my first step actually to getting into the spiritual. For me, I was not comfortable really dipping into the spiritual at the time, because it, you know, it requires you to tap into certain areas. And when it came to certain parts of my other bodies, I was not at the time ready to go and dip into those ponds. So one of the ways I started to reconnect with this, instead of you know, praying or, you know, looking or even trying to figure out and make sense of what I knew to be true about a higher power, I just started drawing. When I was in my trauma spaces, I would look at pretty artwork. I'd listen to music. That was connecting me to this up here, because every single creation, whether you're drawing, knitting, painting, taking photos with your phone, singing, all of those are connected to the soul. All of those are a spiritual expression of your soul. So I felt safer going into like creative type things instead of labeling it as spiritual or religious. This basically represents all of the darkness I felt and experienced when I was younger. This all experiences are showing like some of the happier times, because again, like I said, I was fortunate enough to not be born right into dysfunction. Some of my early years were very, what I would consider to be healthy. And then it kind of switched to this. And so you do what you will with that interpretation. But this is basically what it looked like for me when my spiritual and my energy bodies were off balance. This was a good part of my childhood. That's a good drawing of the dark parts. But then this is also the positive parts, even if most of this stuff was in my head. Imagination, I'm telling you, your imagination can be quite healing by itself. And so a balanced spiritual and energy body, again, I bring up little kid because they go with the flow. They don't resist. They don't, you know what I'm saying? They experience different things and dreams and things. They take it with a sense of curiosity. They take it and they flow with it. They don't, now nightmare's different, but I mean, like, they're not trying to put things in a box. It's literally just letting things flow and just like being in the present with it. How many of us were taught out of that? These are photos that I started drawing when I started to feel more comfortable connecting with the spiritual aspect of things, and it started to take more of a form. So when I started connecting with angels again, this is a byproduct of that. When I started connecting with being grounded, because I was not comfortable in my body for a long time, connected with that. And what I've noticed is as I balance different parts of all of these different bodies, my face started getting brighter. My weight started to drop. I've lost 50 pounds in 6 months, and that was a bonus because I wasn't trying to lose weight because I didn't think I actually was going to be able to do it. Because I tried for 3 years and nothing worked. I got to a point where I'm not feeling pain in my wrists all the time. I am off of most of my meds. All of this was in 6 months. I've been in therapy for over 7 years. And ended up, when I started taking things to the next level, I got to the point I don't need to go to therapy literally every single week. I'm not on antidepressants anymore because I got to a point where I had no choice but to go on that. And like I said, you're doing things already to balance your body. I'm showing you with my own life what is possible. And I am not the only person who has managed to pull this off. As I start to go through this process more and more, I'm finding more and more people who manage to take a more involved approach as far as balancing their entire body. And they don't have issues with chronic pain anymore. They don't have issues with being depressed anymore. They found that career that they wanted. They're making that difference that they wanted. They're smiling the way that they wanted. They have the time to themselves or to their family that they wanted. This is not an anomaly, and I'm seeing this happen more and more and more. And I want you guys to give yourselves permission that wherever you're at right now, it's not where you have to stay. It's not where you have to stay. I want you to give yourself permission to be like, I want something better. I want better. I want to feel better. And I deserve to feel better. That last one is difficult for me sometimes. That was a years-long process. But still, if no one's told you that, I'm telling you now. And you'd be surprised how much it changes, not only the pain, not only the busyness, not only the frustration, it changes your face. You don't have to go and age the way you've been aging. Not unless you choose to. So, we're going to do a quick recap here. I know I did a lot of talking here. But these are the different types of bodies. You can put these together if you'd like. They're actually more broken down into 5. And so by doing something more targeted to balance these individual bodies, they start to they interact with each other, and then as they interact with each other on a positive note, that's where the real profound healing can begin, if you allow it. Now, I am not saying by any means do not work with a provider or a doctor or anything like that. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that there are things that you can do, and feel free to run it by your providers too, that you can do to start balancing these different aspects of your body. And what I have found, and what seems to be something that's in common with every story I've seen that's similar to mine, when you are balanced in your body, the rest of your life follows suit. Whatever's going on in your body, whether it's subconscious or conscious, whether you're aware of it or not, it gets projected to the rest of your life. I have noticed the difference between my relationships, my finances, my appearances, how I deal with, obstacles and setbacks. All of that stuff is related to what is going on in your 5 bodies. So I encourage you to really think about what you can do, because there's so much you can do on your own. I'm all about working with a provider, a practitioner, You know, they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of tools to help you as well. But no one knows your life better than you do. No one knows what makes you tick better than you do. Whether you listen to your body telling you that or not is a whole nother story, but no one really knows you like you. And the pain and the fatigue and the stress that you're feeling, they don't want to be there. They just don't know any other way to get your attention that something needs to change. So with that being said, oh, okay, I can rate that later. With that being said, I encourage you to start really connecting with your intuition, because between all these bodies, everyone has some sort of intuition. This is not like it's only for women or it's only for girls, you know, or it's only for adults. Everybody has an intuition that gives them clues to like, oh yeah, maybe that looks like it's going in the right direction, or it's not. And society kind of teaches us not to rely on that because it's not a super concrete thing like 2 + 2 = 4. The problem is that cuts off an entire aspect of you as a person. And it's hard to get with so many results if you don't truly look at the full picture. So my question to you is, how do you intuitively want to get started with this? I'm going to go into another video that explains the 3-step process that I use and still use to balance out my bodies. And at that point, you guys will be ready to start doing this on your own. I encourage you to start having this conversation with your provider, your therapist, or whoever, even if you're going to put the plan together on your own, because it helps them help you. If they know what you're trying to do, they're going to adjust what they recommend to help you, because they're going to want to adjust it based on whatever you're doing. And if they don't want to do that, then you're talking to the wrong person, and you can always go and talk to another provider and see what their thoughts are on the same situation. So with that said, in the next video, I will go over the 3-step process that I used. So that way, if you want to just go and do this totally on your own, you'll have the steps to go and do that. If you are interested in having a little bit of extra support and going more in depth, as far as like the stuff that I've been talking about, then I have something for you guys and I can talk about that then. So with that said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. Oh wait, I gotta stop screen share. Now I'll see you guys in the next video. See you later.